Hey, I'm Coach Sark, and this is Lawyers and Longhorns.
Welcome to Lawyers and Longhorns. We're here with a man who needs no introduction. Coach Sark, thanks for coming out.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you, Coach.
This is awesome.
Tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Torrance, California. I'm the youngest of 7 in my family, 7 children. And my whole life, I thought I was going to be a baseball player. And I actually went to USC out of high school as a baseball player. Then transferred back to junior college, played both sports again, and then ended up on the football trajectory. And
Here you are.
went to BYU and a lot of stops along the way, and now I'm in Austin, Texas, year 4.
Yeah.
If you can believe that.
What was your position in baseball?
I was a shortstop and a pitcher, and I quickly found out I didn't throw hard enough to be a pitcher, and I couldn't hit a slider, so that was a problem too. So I was like, I had no path at that point. I lost all paths of like what I could be from the baseball perspective.
Did you play other sports besides football and baseball?
I grew up playing soccer. Think about it. My dad was born and raised in Tehran, and he came to the U.S. when he was 18. And moved to Boston, met my mom, full-blooded Irish lady, so I'm half Armenian, half Irish. So soccer in our household is a big deal. My brother was a college soccer player, played professionally. So soccer in our household was a big deal. I played that until the 9th grade, and then I said, enough of that. I want to play American football now. I like that sport better.
Were you always a quarterback?
I was, and I didn't really want to be one early on. I just wanted to play. But then I found out, I was never the most physically gifted player, even as I went through college and played in the CFL. But the game came to me pretty naturally mentally. And so I used to tell myself, I know I'm not as physically gifted as everybody else, but I'm going to be the fastest mental player on every snap. And I think that's how I kind of gravitated to the coaching world, because I wanted to really learn the game. I didn't want to just know the plays to run, but why they worked, predicated on the defense they were playing, and vice versa. What would make this play really hard is if they did this. Okay, what would my answer be? So I tried to play out all the scenarios, and I think that's why it's helped me now become a coach.
How'd you end up at BYU?
I was a junior college transfer, and I had 2 years remaining to play. And I wanted to go somewhere where I was at least going to put myself in a really good position to earn a starting job. I didn't want it to be given to me. But the starting quarterback at that time was from my high school. And he kept telling me I'm leaving early for the NFL draft. His name's John Walsh. And sure enough, the end of my sophomore season in junior college, he declared for the NFL draft. I went to BYU and started 2 years, played for Lavelle Edwards. We were throwing the ball before anybody else was, and it was a blast. We won a bunch of really good games.
Did you have a big arm? Were you?
No, I was short. I did not have a big arm. I was slow. but I'll tell you, the one thing was I could throw it pretty accurately.
Mm-hmm.
If I really tried to work hard on ball placement and throwing a catchable ball. I joke with our quarterbacks now. What is the intent when we call a pass? To complete it. And it doesn't matter if it's 50 yards downfield or if it's 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. If we don't complete the pass, the play's over. And so I really try to just be the most accurate passer I can be, know the coverages so well that I could anticipate where the ball was supposed to go so that when I threw it to the better athletes than me, they could catch and run with it. And then it was like a pass completion for 40 yards when in reality I threw it about 8.
Yeah.
But they would get all the yards for me.
Was Norm Chow your coordinator then?
Yeah, so Lavelle Edwards was the head coach. Norm Chow was the coordinator, and super innovative. Really what that offense was, a little history lesson, that was the air raid offense that we were running at BYU. But we were running it with tight ends and running backs. And obviously the air raid has evolved, and Coach Leach and Hal Mumme were GAs at BYU. They left and went on to Valdosta and then Kentucky, and it obviously spread, and the air raid became the air raid. But that's really what we were running. And so I had a great relationship with Coach Leach. When I was at the University of Washington, he was at Washington State. We would talk about that offense because he was still running it, and that's what I played in college.
You ever think about running it now?
I don't. A little more history lesson on the air raid. The air raid has never won a championship. And I think there's some reasons and layers to that. There's certain ways you have to practice. There's certain schemes that I think your defense needs to see. Well, if you're going to show them to your defense, and so I try to tend to lean into what are the things that are proven that have withstood the test of time. And there's definitely a pro style of offense that historically has proven to be successful.
Not to jump ahead, but you ever think about doing more up-tempo?
I have, and there's been years when I've totally committed to that. Every year, I like to say we try to recreate ourselves. We have a system, but we still try to recreate ourselves to what's in the best interest of the team that we have now. And so there's been years when I went as fast as I could go because I didn't think we were very good on the O-line, and it was a way to kind of minimize the defensive line play against our O-line, and it was successful. But in the end, the hard part about when you just go up tempo is at the end of games when you're trying to shorten the game and shrink possessions, it's hard for those teams to go back into that. And then the winning percentages just aren't as good. So we definitely have a facet of it that we do utilize in some games more often than others. What's the game plan, and then how are we going to try to execute it, and then what are the contingency plans in game if that original game plan sucks and now we need to go do something else, right?
Well, you might be the offensive genius. Just know that every time that we get the ball, I'm like, let's go up tempo.
Go fast, go fast.
I've never heard him say that.
Fast is great. No, but seriously, fast is great when you score.
Yeah.
Fast is not any good when it's 3 plays and you got to punt it right back to them, and your defense is sitting over there on the sideline like, we just sat here for 38 seconds.
There's a lot of up-tempo talk
yes.
in this box.
Yes.
I love that.
How did you decide you want to get into coaching?
Interestingly enough, when I got done with BYU, I went and played 3 years in the Canadian Football League. And I said, I just didn't want to be a lifer in the CFL. And so I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to move back home to California and figure it out. And so when I got there, I was actually working for a .com startup. It was in that .com era where...
Like 2000?
Yeah, it was like blowing up, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was working for a couple guys that had just left Cisco Systems, and they were doing the startup, and they were probably ahead of their time. It was actually an ingenious idea. But they were ex-athletes, and so they allowed me, as long as I was in sales, as long as I was taking care of my business, I could coach. And so I started coaching at my junior college. And I was like, man, I really love this. This is awesome. Oddly enough, I didn't think I could really make a living doing it though, right?
Right.
Well, this guy by the name of Pete Carroll gets hired at USC. And I'm literally, the day he gets hired, I'm on a sales call at Annenberg School of Communications at USC. And I said, I'm just going to go over and talk to him. And he's like, okay, Sark, it's good to see you again. Why don't you come back and see me tomorrow? So I go back up to SC the next day. That next day, he hires Norm Chow as the offensive coordinator at USC, who was my offensive coordinator at BYU. And Coach Carroll offers me a graduate assistant position. And I thought for a minute, and I have a mortgage, I have a car payment, I have a baby on the way, and I'm going to go work for $16,000. But I said, I'm going to go for it, and I basically budgeted for a year to be able to do it. And I loved it, and it took off. And from that point on, it's been just
go
blazing trails,
What's the difference between working with Saban and working with Pete Carroll?
Oh, yeah. So 2 really different individuals.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's Pete Carroll chewing his gum, wearing gloves at practice, throwing the ball, having fun, playing the piano in the team meeting. Over here's Nick Saban, like almost like military, discipline. If he smiles at you, man, he really likes you because he doesn't smile at many people. But in the end, they're probably closer together behind closed doors than what the public persona of them is, right? And at their core, they're both brilliant football minds. They both have incredible work ethic. They're both tremendous leaders. All right, they both know who they are and then what they believe in and what's important to them, and then they instill that in their organizations because ultimately they both want the same thing. They're both winners. They're great competitors, and so I was extremely fortunate. I'm one of maybe 3 guys that had an opportunity to work for both. Myself, Lane Kiffin, and Dan Quinn now with the Commanders, and so we both probably we both probably have taken things from each of them and then ultimately put it into who we are as ourselves. But extremely fortunate to have worked with both those 2 guys.
Do you ever hear yourself saying things that they say when you're
Yes.
coaching? And yeah.
I do. And sometimes I'm like, man, I just sounded just like Coach Saban. And I told myself I'd never be Nick Saban. And you just sounded like Pete Carroll, like nobody was better than Pete Carroll. You could, remember I'm in the locker room at USC when we lose to Texas for the national championship. And devastated, right? Anytime you get that close and then you don't win, you're devastated. And you would have thought we won. His ability to build you up, even in some of the most adverse times, he was incredible at that, But I hear some of that in me because I do believe in positive reinforcement. Now, obviously there's times when you have to get on the guys for not handling their business. But in the end, if Pete Carroll did teach me one thing, if you really love the players, they'll love you back. You can have open dialogue with them and share things and motivate them. Where Coach Saban, there was a respect factor, and it might have been a little bit coaching out of fear, but they respected that because they knew how he worked. And so it was different, but yet at the end, they were trying to accomplish the same thing.
How would you describe your philosophy as a coach?
It's interesting. I am a firm believer in personal connection. I think that, connecting with the individual players, connecting with the staff, creating an environment of want to as opposed to have to. And I think that that's what we've done here in 4 years. It's taken time, but I believe in culture, and I believe that culture is organic. I believe in personal relationships. I believe in connectivity. I believe in love. And a lot of times you don't associate football and love. Like those two words, those two words don't cross paths. But in the end, I think that our players and our staff know that how I go about my business is with good intentions for them to try to put them in the best position to be successful, whatever we're trying to do. But I think that goes back to how am I walking into the building every day, right? Am I upbeat? Do I have great energy? Am I serving others? Am I inspiring them to be better today than they were yesterday? And if I can create that environment, which I think we've done a pretty good job of, then they're going to try to operate in that same space. And so, and that was something I had to learn over time because when you're a young coach, I was 34 as a head coach at University of Washington. I didn't even know, and so I used to ride the emotional roller coaster. When we won, I was the greatest coach ever. When we lost, I was the worst, right? And I think now I've gotten to a much better space to have a level of consistency. And that's probably the biggest thing now in the second half of my career. If there's one word I would use for me is consistent. And if I'm consistent with our coaches, if I'm consistent with our players and our staff, then they know what to expect each day. And then generally I'll get the best version of them.
There's not a lot of coaches that are D1 coaches, and a lot of them are your competitors or they're pros. Like, who do you look to if you've got, whether it's a problem in the locker room or I'm looking at this defense and I don't know, like who are the people you can turn to there's not like a book on how to coach football. So how do you figure that out? You
lean into those, and I think you have a pretty good relationship. But like Lane Kiffin and I have a pretty good relationship. We can bounce things off of each other. Raheem Morris, the head coach in Atlanta now with the Falcons, we have a great relationship with. Dan Quinn and I have a great relationship. I've forged a really good relationship with Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers. I've forged a really good relationship with Sean McVay in LA, and a really good relationship with Mike McDaniel with the Dolphins. And a lot of that is because we're kind of from the same school of thought, whether it's systematically or how we like to run our teams. And so, you just try to tap into the people that, not that you want them to think like you, but they're how the recommendation they would make to handle a situation would make sense to me.
Philosophically,
as opposed to be something that was totally from left field. But I do still tap into Coach Saban. I still definitely tap into Coach Carroll as well.
Yeah.
But what's your philosophy on recruiting?
Recruiting, I would say the first thing about recruiting for us, naturally, we're trying to build the most talented roster that we can build, right?
Sure.
That's my responsibility at the University of Texas. Can I build a team year in and year out that competes for championships? There's a caveat to that. We never sacrifice character for talent. We try our best, right? We really try our best because our culture is so important to us that sometimes maybe we don't take the guy that everybody on the internet thinks we should take, but they don't know maybe some of the things that we know of why he wouldn't fit into what we're about. Because I am a believer in culture beats talent. Like, you can have the most talented roster in the world, but if they play as individuals, teams with culture will beat them. Our goal is to combine talented, high character people to make up our culture. That's when we're really dangerous, right? And that's when we can win the games we're supposed to win, but also win those tough games and tough moments when maybe you're not at your best. So that's the first part. Then we basically have profiles by position that we try to get players to fit, whether it's a defensive end, maybe no shorter than 6'3", 240 pounds to 255 pounds, runs this fast, so on and so forth. That doesn't mean we only live in that box, because there are outliers, because there's these unique qualities about him that are, maybe he's a 6'1" defensive end, but he runs a 4.4 40. Well, that can offset those things. But at the end, when it all boils down, I'm really looking for unique competitors. Not good, not great, unique. Because you have to have a competitive spirit, in my opinion, to be good at anything. It's not just about the talent. The talent might get you through high school, but at this level, with the teams we have to beat, or the guys at your position group that you're competing against, if you don't have unique competitive qualities about you, it's gonna be really difficult.
How do you figure that out? Like, I mean, you can see tape of guys and you can maybe project, oh, he's gonna grow a little bit or whatever, but how do you know that they got the right mentality to?
It's like, well, I like to FaceTime the guys myself. And so when you FaceTime them, what are they doing, right? And I'm okay with them even playing video games, because if you're playing a video game, you're actually competing. And if you think you're really good, you're gonna tell me about it. When we're on a visit and we go to Topgolf, is a guy sitting down on the couch just looking at his phone, or is he actually trying to hit these balls? And maybe he's never hit a golf ball in his life, but he's trying to get good at it because he doesn't want to not be good at something. A lot of times coaches will watch highlights of players. Our staff, we will do that, but we'll watch all of his plays. And how does he play when they're ahead by 28 points? How does he play when they're behind by 28 points? Does he pick and choose when to play really hard or not to play hard? So we try to look for all those things. And then the more you talk to them, they tell you, right? They tell you what's important to them. And sometimes they may not exude it all the time, but it's in there. And then that's our job to draw it out of them.